Hi, it's Angie. I'm coming on today with a different sort of video. It's a face-to-face chatty video. The reason I'm coming on is to talk to you about what's been happening to me since March. I'm probably going to do this video in two parts. I think I'm going to do the first part on what happened to me pre-surgery and then like a post-surgical update. Although obviously I'm filming this sort of post-surgery. The reason why I'm doing this is because there's not a lot of videos out there on this procedure in the UK. There's quite a few sort of from America, and it is more or less the same, but there are a few sort of differences. Um, so I just thought I would come on and talk to you about what basically went on. So it all started in March, early March, just probably a fortnight or so before the first lockdown. Um, I went for a routine blood test just to check on my inflammation levels, as I do every few months or so. And after the blood test, I had like a tingly feeling in the back of my hand that day, which I don't normally have after having blood taken. But I just thought, a bit like when you have a cannula in, you have that sort of feeling in the back of your hand. I just thought they'd probably hit a nerve, not a nerve or a, I don't know, whatever. So I didn't really think anymore. I woke up the next day and it was still there, and it was in fact worse. It was like the whole back of my hand felt like I'd been hit by a hammer. And I was kind of expecting it to bruise, and it didn't. Again, I wasn't really particularly concerned about it. And then over the next couple of days, it's my left hand that's affected. My middle finger started to go numb, and that I did think was a little bit strange, but not sort of too concerning really. So I found that if I ran my hand under sort of hot water tap, it would ease not exactly ease it, but it's like my brain didn't notice it for a while. It wasn't painful, but the numbness was like really weird, and I couldn't grip things properly. I was still at work at this time. It was before everywhere sort of closed down, and I say probably within a week or so after that, I was at home furloughed. I started to notice at night, I didn't get pins and needles as such, but I had like a heavy sensation in my arm, and it did start to wake me up at night. And in the morning, it would be more numb, very, very tingly in my fingers. And I'd started to get a few like different nerve sensations. And I say it wasn't painful, it was just more annoying. I guess had lockdown not happened, I probably would have gone to the doctors around this point just to get it checked out. But I think they were closed by this time, and I certainly didn't feel it was an A&E emergency or anything like that. So I did notice again around that time I was waking up with like a stiffness in my neck, almost like, if you lie funny and you get like a bit of a stiff neck. It was a bit like that again, and that seemed to go on for a while. I don't know, maybe 2-3 weeks, maybe more. I'm not really sure. Again, it wasn't painful, it was just annoying. And then everything seemed to settle down, but the pain in the back of, or that sensation in the back of my hand and the numbness in my fingers didn't go. The numbness is still there now. The numbness kind of started to spread to more fingers. And I was by sort of May, I was beginning to think that there was something wrong, and that as soon as I probably could, I should go and see my GP. So again, or even up until this point, it wasn't really painful. It was annoying. I might have the odd day where I had a few extra tingles that were a bit painful, but nothing too major. So we hit sort of June time, early June, and it started to get painful. So I tried taking ibuprofen, which was quite funny because I did have some, but I didn't have loads, and I couldn't get any because after lockdown, during lockdown, I think you could get ibuprofen and no paracetamol. Well, I hit it where everyone was buying the ibuprofen and I couldn't get any. So I did find I could buy it a bit, but not a lot. So I got family members, if they could find it in the supermarkets, they were adding it to their like online shopping orders for me because I was like having to take it. I mean, I was taking it 4 times a day, and I was literally clock watching until I could take the next dose. It was that bad. I have got stronger painkillers, but they didn't touch it. I mean, ibuprofen didn't really, but it was better than nothing. So I we got to the point where you couldn't just walk into your doctors, but you could phone them and you could speak to a nurse and they would get you to speak to the doctor if they thought it was necessary. I spoke to the nurse and she phoned me back and said she'd spoken to the doctor and he said to take ibuprofen, which I clearly had been doing and was not effective. So that was a Friday. On the Monday, I phoned back again because that weekend was hell. And I spoke to her and he said, "Oh, maybe come and have another blood test to check your oh god, what was it? I think it was inflammation levels again." And I thought, no, I've had enough of this. So I'm lucky that I have insurance paid for me via work. So I actually thought, well, where do I even phone to start this? So I phoned the BMI, which is my local private hospital, and there's a department that you can sort of describe your symptoms and they will help you to know who you need to see, because I didn't even know what sort of a doctor I needed. By this time I was pretty convinced I'd got carpal tunnel because my mum, she's had both of hers done, and the symptoms were very similar, how it was waking me up at night, the nerve pain and all that. But I didn't have pain in my wrist, so that was the only thing I wasn't sure of. So anyway, I phoned the BMI and she said, "Oh, that sounds a little bit like carpal tunnel. Um, we'll get you to see a orthopedic doctor." So that was fine. Well, not see, because at that point the hospital still hadn't opened up, but I was able to do a telephone consultation, and he phoned me back, Mr. Sloan, the next day. Lovely, lovely guy. And he said, "I think you've got carpal tunnel." From how I was describing the nighttime symptoms. So what he did was he did two things. He sent out a nighttime splint for me to wear in bed, and he arranged at another hospital near Leamington Spa to go and have the electrical conductivity tests, which they always do if they suspect carpal tunnel. Oh, excuse me. Or anything like that. So the splint came first and it was even more painful. And I thought, is it supposed to be like that? And I couldn't wear it. It was horrible. It seemed to just squeeze everything even more and make the pain even more concentrated. So I gave up on that one. So basically I went and had the tests the next week, and he said, "I can see there's a problem." He said, "It's not your wrist." He said, "It's coming from higher up." So he did another test, and I am sorry, I can't remember the name of the test, but it's one that they very often do at the same time as the electrical conductivity test. And it's a bit like an acupuncture needle that they place in on different parts of your arm, just one needle at a time, and pass this same current through. You don't feel it, it's not painful at all. And he said, it's your spine. And that actually quite surprised me, actually. Um, so I went back to see Mr. Sloan. And from this point onwards, I think I was having at least one appointment every week. Luckily, my husband was on lockdown. So again, he'd been furloughed for a second time at this point. I'd been due to go back to work around this time, but obviously couldn't. There was no point because I was having all these tests and I didn't know what was wrong with me. So I went back to see Mr. Sloan. So he then arranged an MRI scan the next week, which I had. Went back to see him the following week, and he said it's not overly good, actually. Not what he expected. What had happened was the problem was the vertebrae C5, C6, C7 area, which is my cervical spine, which is your neck. What had happened? Well, several things had happened. He said there is some wear and tear anyway on your discs, on other discs as well. I'm a bit worried about that, to be honest, because I don't know if they're going to cause any problems in coming time. But anyway, basically, well, two of the discs had herniated, a bit like what they used to call a slip disc, but more than that, they'd actually slipped out of. There's like a protective sheath that they're in, and then there's a sheath between the vertebrae and your spinal cord, and one of them had actually broken right through that sheath, and they were both like sitting on my spinal cord. So basically it had compressed my spine, so I had a completely compressed spine, and I also had a bone spur also pressing on my spinal cord. So I then had to have another CT scan of the bone spur area, and that was nothing to do with sort of my recovery or my operation, really. It was just so that my surgeon could see that little area in more detail, so he knew what to expect when he went in. So after these tests, I was then referred to from orthopedic to neurology. Lovely consultant, Mr. Joshi. He explained how risky the surgery is, obviously because it's spinal. The risks were horrendous, but it didn't worry me too much because I know they have to tell you the worst case scenario, but I've also got a friend who's just had spinal surgery. Funnily enough, I went with her for a couple of her appointments because she's on her own and she was a bit scared to go on her own. So I was kind of with her when the consultant was giving her the same risks, and I mean she was fine. So yeah, it's risky, but it didn't scare me as much as it might have done it had I not been with my friend previously. So then everything started happening quite quickly. The pain, I can't even describe some of the days of the pain. You could see on the scan there was like a white dot on at some point on my spinal cord, and that was where the nerves were completely compressed and the messages weren't getting to and from my brain properly. So at my worst, I was falling over a lot, stumbling over, like falling over nothing. I couldn't go out on my own. I wasn't safe. I didn't feel safe. I had no inclination to do anything particularly. Everything was just an effort. Some days the pain was just awful. Then I began to lose, this was a bit scary, I began to lose words. I knew what I wanted to say, but I couldn't like say it. I did also get quite a lot of other neurological symptoms at one point, which I phoned 111 because I didn't know if I should do anything about it, and they actually sent me to hospital for a neurology assessment, and I ended up there for a couple of days, and I had another scan. Luckily things didn't seem any worse than the first scan. mean, they knew what was going on. They just needed, because it can be life threatening, so they just needed to make sure that nothing had gone so bad that it could threaten my life. So I'm sort of jumping ahead here, because it was then probably like a 3 week wait for my surgery, which I mean is nothing. So the pain was getting worse and worse. I had been put on some naproxen, which was slightly stronger, but they really weren't helping. So I go in for my surgery, and they find that my blood pressure is too high, and they couldn't do the surgery. So I then have to monitor my blood pressure at home twice a day, write it down. I'm on tablets from my GP to bring it down, and my surgery is rescheduled for what was 4 weeks later. It was scheduled, it was on the 20th of October. It's the day after my birthday, so I actually spent my birthday in isolation, because obviously I'd had the COVID test 2 days prior to that, and you have to isolate from having your COVID test to the surgery. So I couldn't do anything or go anywhere. Not that I had any intentions of anyway, because I felt too ill. But yeah, so once actually things got moving with the hospital, I mean, it moved fast. I had so many appointments in such a small amount of time. So I went in, as I say, for my surgery on the 20th of October. So today is the 2nd of November, I think it is. So I'll be 2 weeks post-op tomorrow, and I think my scar is actually really, really good. It's healing well. I didn't have stitches. I had the metal clips, and I think they heal great. So yeah, what they actually did was something called ACDF procedure. Oh gosh, try to remember what it stands for now. Anterior cervical discectomy and fusion. So what they actually did was they go in via my neck, and they take out the two I don't know, I can't think what they're called. Between your vertebrae, you've got like little the discs basically that had herniated. They take out the discs, which is like a fluid, like a thick gloopy fluid. Clean it all up. Clean it all up off my spine. Remove the bone spur. Put in did a bone graft, and put new bone in between the vertebrae, because obviously they can't support themselves. They have to have something to hold them up. So put new sort of like discs in, so to speak. And then they fused my spine at that point. So it's a titanium plate, so I won't go ping. I won't set any alarms off in like airports or anything. It's just got to remember it's there when if I have any further surgeries or things. They always say, have you got any plates, screws, or anything like that? I've got to remember now that I have. So yeah, that's what they did. I find it weird that to think that they go in via the front when it's my spine that's the problem. And also they're working practically blind. They can only see so far. And when they actually do the fusion, it's really scary. I think the bit that I find more scary is the fact that they can't actually see where they're working. They literally do it on through an ultrasound scanner. That's how they work, how to like place everything. And I mean, everything has got to be so precise to within the millimeter, because it's your spine. So that's yeah, that it quite amazes me, really. But the other thing that happened when I went in for my surgery the second time, when it did actually take place, I'd gone for a pre-op, like as I say, a few days before with the COVID test and everything, but they didn't do the MRSA swab. It's like a groin swab. They didn't do it. And when they came to literally take me to theatre, there they have to check this, and of course they hadn't got it, had they? So because I'd had it done previously when I'd gone in for my previous surgery, they were like, "That's fine. We can just phone down to the lab to have it checked." Well, they phoned down to the lab, and because of COVID, they're just so busy. Nobody was answering the phone, so they quickly did another swab, and I thought I'd probably just have to wait for the results. And they said, "No, we'll take you down to theatre anyway. It's fine." So I get down to theatre. There I am, lying on the bed, ready for them to do all the anaesthetic-y bits. My surgeon comes in and explains that they haven't got the COVID swab, and I thought he was going to say that they couldn't do it. Sorry, not the COVID swab, the MRSA swab. And he said, I really don't want to delay your surgery anymore, because it's bad, and it can become life-threatening, and you've had enough, and the longer it goes, the more likely to have more permanent damage. As it is, I think I have got some permanent damage, but time will tell. So he said, I'm happy to go ahead, but I'm going to give you the option to cancel right now if you want to. He said all it would mean is if that swab was positive, you would have to stay in hospital for a week or so and be on an antibiotic drip. I'm like, no, do it. I don't care, just do it. So he did it. So I'm going to leave this video here because I'm going to come back, because I'm at nearly 22 minutes now. I'm going to come back and just explain how I've been post-op and whatnot. So I will see you in a few minutes.